If you have $1,000 to spend $750 on the kayak, $250 on the paddle, and you will come back and thank me.
Hey everybody, it's Chris from Out West with Chris, and I am here at Headwaters Kayak in Lodi, California. We're gonna chat with Dan, the owner, about paddles. I'm still basically a noob when it comes to kayaking, and I have a lot to learn. So I don't know shit about paddles, basically. So Dan's gonna educate me, and hopefully we can all learn something along the way.
Well, I appreciate your honesty. I think a lot of people make the mistake of assuming they know more than they do, because kayaking is one of those sports that's kind of counterintuitive. You get into it and you're like, I just want to go out there and paddle around. It should be easy.
Right.
As you do it, the more you do it, I've been doing it now for 26 years. I'm still constantly learning or finding things that's like, oh, I didn't realize. So the paddle is probably, next to your kayak, the single most important piece of gear, maybe even more important than your kayak, because the paddle's the thing you're using. Think about it. Every mile, as you're stroking, 1,000 strokes. Roughly, I mean, it's different for different kayaks, 1,000 times per mile. Now, let's think about that. Would you rather do that with a 5-pound weight or a 2-pound weight?
Right.
You know, that makes the biggest effect on if you're tired at the end of the day or your form goes to crap because your arms are, you know, down here and you're kicked back. Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when people buy kayaks, they throw in something like this. Just aluminum, super heavy plastic blades. I mean, it'll get you on the water. It'll get you moving through the water. But it's going to be extremely difficult to have good form or paddle very far with that paddle. So give that a shot. Just put that in your hand and kind of swing it around. That's a good way to get a feel for something we call swing weight. You know, the weight of the paddle on the ends of the blades. That's what makes all the difference.
And I'm going to just jump in. When I bought my first kayak, I bought it from a different company, and it was a package deal. So I got a PFD, I got the kayak, I got a couple paddle leashes, and a paddle. And it wasn't until I met Dan that I really came to understand the importance of a good paddle. He introduced me to a pretty decent paddle. It changed how much I enjoyed kayaking, how far I could go, how long I could go without getting exhausted on the water. So this is all really good information.
The paddle that they throw in, we throw these in for a reason. I mean, I do it too. We're always trying to be competitive, and if somebody is like wheeling a deal and they're shopping around, sure, I'll throw in a paddle. But you're going to get what you pay for. You're going to get a free paddle that you're going to probably hate, and you'll be back in to buy a decent one. What I'd much rather do is have somebody come in, try some different paddles, get an education. We have every paddle we sell in the demo fleet. You know, so try it out and know what you're buying and understand why you're buying. And I'm going to give you a good deal. If you're going to buy a kayak from me, I'm going to give you a good deal on a paddle. So just know, if you have $1,000 to spend $750 on the kayak, $250 on the paddle, and you will come back and thank me. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but trust me. So let's just move along the wall here. We're going to talk a little bit about materials and what makes a paddle lighter, what makes a paddle better. So the first thing we're going to start off with, we showed you the aluminum. Then they get the aluminum 2-piece take apart. There's definitely different caliber of aluminum paddles. This one's got a nice nylon fitting. The paddles fit together really nice. They're much lighter weight. This is a Benny Branches paddle. It goes for $60. If you're going to get an aluminum cheap paddle, at least get a Benny Branches Whisper. The next step up, we have fiberglass shafts. Still has the plastic blades, but the shaft itself is going to be warmer on your hands. It's going to be a little bit lighter weight. And the fitting on the fiberglass paddles is always really, really tight and snug. When you shake it, there's no movement in the paddle. But you're still heavy swing weight. You'll hear me talk a lot about swing weight. As we go down the wall, the paddles get lighter and lighter. So Aquabound, this is a Stingray. This gets a fiberglass reinforcing on the blades. And what that does is it stiffens the paddle, but it also makes it a bit lighter. Also a carbon shaft. This one jumps up to 139, but this is where you really start to get into a noticeable difference in your paddle. We could talk a lot about different blade shapes and dihedral, but the fact of the matter is the weight is the #1 most important thing that you're going to notice a difference in.
I got to jump it again. I went from a paddle that was probably about 5 pounds to one that was 18 ounces, I think, or 19 ounces.
Yeah, you got a pretty decent setup.
Or 20 ounces, maybe.
I think probably close to 20. It was a carbon shaft with a hand-laid fiberglass blade.
Right.
So really light swing weight.
And it's awesome. Like I don't know. It's really cool having a paddle that you almost feel like you're just moving air. I mean, it's just so nice. So let's keep going.
Yeah, and that's what it really comes down to is the swing weight. So when you're paddling, that weight of the end of your paddle is offset out. It's like having a weight in a 5-gallon bucket out here.
Right.
Every time you add something in, it's going to get more and more leverage on your arm. So lightweight. This paddle here is carbon reinforced blades. This is the lightest paddle you can get with still having a plastic blade without going to something that's hand laid, carbon, or fiberglass. This paddle goes for $189, and definitely the best bang for the buck in the shop. We sell more of this paddle, the Stingray or the Manta Ray. The carbon hybrid is by far best bang for your buck. So Aquabound is one of my bigger companies. We also sell Werner paddles, and they sort of do the same lineup. Their blade shapes are a little different. They're a little bit shorter, a little bit wider, more power in the water. The Werners are definitely built to be indestructible. They're carbon shaft, fiberglass reinforcing on the blades, and everything about their paddles is just extremely well made. They're made right up in Washington. All the fittings, the buttons are just perfect. They're works of art. So, especially as we get into our higher end paddles, Werner is sort of the best name in the game. Their paddles are a little bit heavier, but with the added weight, you definitely get a lot of durability. That sort of gives you a range from $70 to $189. The Werner paddles actually go for $130, so really good value.
Oh, really?
And a lot of time the fishermen, when they're buying a kayak, it's either going to be, you know, their first kayak. I'm going to try to get them either a feel free or a Werner at that $100 to $130 price point, because it's something that's going to serve them well. It's going to be durable, and as they get into fishing, it'll probably become their spare paddle that lives in their kayak or a buddy boat paddle. But at least it's something that's going to be good quality. It's going to last them a lifetime.
Gotcha.
Now let's jump walls, because this is where we really get into legitimate paddles. Hand-laid fiberglass.
It's gorgeous too.
You pick this up, there's nothing to this. It's as light as a feather. And the biggest difference is the swing weight. These are all hand-laid fiberglass blades. They make them in a mold. They suck all the epoxy and the resin out of them, and there's just nothing to them. It's incredible. Also, the carbon shafts get a lot nicer. This paddle here goes for $259, so you do have a bit of a jump in price, but you will notice an exponential jump in performance. You will not be tired at the end of the day. Your arms aren't going to go from here to down in your lap. This is a paddle that you can have good form, use all day long, and not be exhausted. This is real similar to what I sold you, Chris, because you know, I knew you were getting into it, and I knew like this guy's serious about it. Kayaking shouldn't be that much work. I mean, granted, fishing kayaks tend to be a little bit slower than a recreational kayak.
Right.
Some are faster than others. The paddle is the biggest thing.
Right.
I mean, you're going to be pushing a kayak 2 to 4 miles an hour, depending on the hole shape. But it's this motion, picking this up, that's actually going to tire you out. It's kind of like gas mileage. It's the difference between going 2 miles and going 5 miles before you get exhausted.
Right, and
Does that
then
make sense?
Yeah, and compound that with poor form, because you know, I'm self-taught, right? So I'm sure my form isn't perfect.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I mean, nobody's is. I paddled for probably 15 years before I ever took a lesson. And when I took my first lesson, I was like, I don't know anything. Like, and I've been doing this wrong for so long. I got all this stuff to relearn. If there's any advice I can give somebody starting off, it's like, come to a beginner class, or if you're going to come demo different kayaks, like, get on the water with us and let us just teach you some basic stuff, because what you're going to find is your learning curve will be like this as opposed to like this. I mean, it really will just change the way you paddle right out of the gate.
That's cool.
So we've got to get on the water, Chris.
Yeah, I know.
So a couple more trick things let's just talk about. This one's really sick paddle.
That's gorgeous.
Okay, so this is the next big jump, whether it be wood or we also have a foam core. But what we're looking at here is the buoyancy in the blade, okay? And the smooth backside of the blade. These just move and cut through the water so much nicer. And the buoyancy is the biggest factor. So when I talk about buoyancy, I'm talking about the paddle dipping down into the water.
Oh, no way.
I take my stroke, and that paddle wants to go kaplunk out of the water.
So it's almost like a natural movement in a way.
Yeah, so it does two things. It puts energy back into your stroke, and it gives you a lot of feedback as you're taking your stroke. You dip that paddle in the water, and it kind of wants to already pop out of your hips. So if I can just kind of guide somebody into planting at your toes, taking out of your hips, the paddle sort of reinforces that good behavior.
Oh wow! How much does that style paddle? Where are we starting to get as far as price range?
$279 for the carbon with the wood,
That's not that bad.
and then they jump up to around $400 for the carbon foam core.
Okay, that gets pretty serious.
Yeah, but it's the last paddle you ever buy. I mean, now that I use these paddles, I could never go back to anything else because I feel like I'm using a club. I mean, I hate to even say that, but even this, I noticed a significant difference from this. So, I guess I'm sort of spoiled. I mean, that's really the reason I have a kayak shop, is because I'm a kayak nerd and I want to have all the latest and greatest stuff, and it supports my addiction, right?
Right.
So.
Hey, I have a couple noob questions.
Yeah, go.
I'm looking in at this rack right here, and I see the contoured handle.
Yeah,
what's
that's actually a great question.
What's the deal with that?
So Werner Paddles is all about making the best paddles in the world. So they do a few things different than everyone else. They have the option of bent shaft or straight shaft, as well as standard diameter or smaller diameter if you have smaller hands.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. The idea with the bent shaft is it's putting your wrist at a neutral angle. So when you take a stroke, you're not putting any strain on your wrist. It's nice and neutral. Whereas if it was straight, you get a little bit of a kick and potentially a little bit of a overuse injury if you're to paddle all the time, do it lots. So that puts your wrist at a nice neutral angle. But the other thing about paddling, I always suggest, is a nice loose grip. That's one of the mistakes a lot of beginners make, is they go
over gripping the paddle.
They're used to gripping like a steering wheel or a baseball bat or something.
Or a fishing rod.
Or a fishing rod. Well, a fishing rod, I think you still have a loose grip.
Firm but flexible.
Exactly, you want to have control of the paddle, but you don't want to be death gripping it, because that's what strains your body. It also gives you blisters. I mean, a lot of people have probably gone out the first time and got a nice blister right there. Hold it nice and loose. I like to think of a British person drinking a cup of tea. If you're death gripping it, you're gonna end up with calluses and probably some sore joints. So, but the bent shaft, that's what it's for.
Okay, my other question is the different shapes of paddles. You got the lower profile paddles, and then you got the bigger, nicer. Well, not necessarily nicer, but the bigger, wider.
Yeah, right.
And I go with a wider paddle.
Yeah, me too.
Because I like having that. What I would call it is having bite. It's almost like traction in the water. So when you put your paddle into, from going from a dead stop to moving, it feels like you have more horsepower when you first get going.
Yeah,
is that right?
That's a great way to put it. Okay. I like to equate. I'm a bike guy, so I like to put it to gears on a bike. The bigger, wider blade is like pushing a taller gear. It's going to be more effort to push it, but you're going to get more propulsion with every stroke. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The little narrower, smaller blade is like a lower gear where you're doing a higher cadence and more strokes per mile, but it's less effort to move through the water.
So essentially more efficient in the long run with one of these smaller paddles, or not?
Well, if you're a touring kayak, that's why these are really popular for sea kayakers, because they're out doing lots and lots of miles.
Yeah.
All right, so if I'm keeping up 3 miles an hour all day, yeah, this is going to be more efficient for sure.
Oh, really?
If I'm stopping and going and I need power to accelerate, this one is actually going to be better because it has more grip and more power. Also, the shorter, wider blade has more, because it has more grip, more control. So if I'm fishing a spot and I'm moving around side to side, this one's actually much easier to have dexterity to slide and to move through the water than the longer, narrower blade.
Okay.
So I tend to lean in this direction, especially for kayak fishermen. But like I always say, you play Goldilocks, you be the person that makes that call. They're all available in the demo fleet, even my $500 paddles. Go try some different ones out before you make that investment. We have them on the water at Lodi Lake, so people can just literally take 5 different paddles and go play.
If you live in the Central Valley, the Bay Area, that's such a cool thing. I mean, I don't really know I guess you can take some demos out in a few of the other kayak places. But that's really cool that you can, if you're looking at buying a kayak, you can take the kayak and pick a paddle that you're looking at getting, take them out and test them before you buy them.
Yeah, and not just test them. Go out with Bill, go out with Matt, go out with Nick. We're all fishermen. We all love the sport, and we want to get people the right gear the first time. And even if you're in another area of the country and look for a kayak shop that really knows their stuff. If you walk into the kayak shop and it's all prim and proper and they don't really know what they're talking about, turn around and walk out. Go to the shop that has gear drying in the back and fishing rods stashed in the corner, because they get it,
Right, you guys are doing it.
Yeah, exactly. We're out there doing it. We're not just selling off of some internet video. Like we really know the stuff, and we're out there using it 3-4 times a week.
Cool. All right. Anything else we need to know about paddles before we wrap this up?
Well, I don't want to bore people anymore.
That's a pretty good primer.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of the next step, I mean, you know the materials, you know. One thing, we forgot to talk about, like, how to size a paddle for the boat. So,
okay.
Everyone buying a kayak out there, there's lots of different kayaks and lots of different widths and what paddle is going to work best for me. People often think of it as simple as like, oh, I'll just put my arm up here and whatever, like it's this height. But it has everything to do with your height, the width of your boat, how high you sit up out of the water.
Okay.
So if you were in a sit inside, like say a Jackson Kilroy where you sit down low and you're close to the water,
right,
you would actually want a much shorter paddle than if you were in like your boat, a lure with the elevated seat.
Right.
Okay, so it has to do with your height, the width of the kayak, and then how high your seat goes. For a basic recreational sit on top kayak, 230 to 240 depending on your height. I think like 5'10" is probably the cutoff.
Okay.
Under 5'10", do 230. Over 5'10", 240. If you're sitting
elevated,
like in a lawn chair style seat, 240 to 250. And if you're over 6 foot tall, 260. Like in your kayak, you're probably using like a 250. The lure, it's 36 inches wide. It's got an elevated seat.
I've got one of the things I like about the paddle that you turned me on to is it has the adjustable ferrule. How do you say that word?
Ferrule.
Ferrule. Yeah. The adjustable ferrule. So I can take it from, I think it's 250 to 265.
Perfect, yeah.
So when I go sit up, when I raise the seat and the lure up, I extend that out to about 265. Sometimes it's 260 to 265. I'm not super precise. But that's really nice being able to adjust it. And then when I sit back down, when I'm moving, I bring it in tighter.
Yeah, and a good thing to do if you already have your kayak, you already have your paddle, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I got the right size paddle. Pay attention to when you're stroking. So when you're taking your stroke, is the whole paddle in the water. You want to bury the whole face. You don't want to bury a bunch of shaft, and you don't want half the blade sticking out of the water.
Okay.
So if I'm paddling and my paddle is fully submerged, I know I've got the right length. Again, if I'm only halfway submerged, probably do a little bit longer. And if I'm like this deep in the shaft, like kayak fishermen tend to always go way too long. Get something a little shorter.
Okay.
The most important thing though is like make do and get out there and go fishing and use what you've got and enjoy it. But as you upgrade, definitely make sure you get the right stuff. Last thing I would say, and most importantly, is take a class. Kayak fishermen tend to not want to take a class. They just want to go out there and do it. But you will benefit so much from just learning the body postures, rotating, using your core instead of your arms. Like I can't tell you how many people I see like in the kickback recliner mode. I call it the T-Rex paddle with these short little arms.
T-Rex paddle.
You're getting like 2 foot of propulsion per stroke as opposed to like when you dip and you rotate. You're talking 3 to 4 foot of propulsion per stroke. That's a lot. That's the difference between 2 and 4 miles.
Right.
So definitely take time to take a class, please.
Okay. Well, geez, I'm gonna rewatch this video after I upload it a couple times just to let some of this sink in. This is some great information, man. I really appreciate you helping us all learn more about paddles and about paddle sports in general, and just the different options that are out there. There are so many options. If you're new, make sure you go to a shop and talk to people, get comfortable with them prior to purchasing your kayak or any of your gear. You'll be able to tell if the person you're talking to really knows their stuff and is passionate about the sport. So if you're getting somebody like at a Dick's Sporting Good who's just trying to sell you something and move on to the next person, you're not going to get the level of service that would really do you justice. So I highly recommend these guys. I know not all of you live in California, so go to your local kayak shop, talk to the people, get comfortable with the staff there, and then start asking your questions.
The other thing I would say, if you're out there, I am so accessible via the internet, Instagram, Facebook, email. Like people can definitely reach out to me with questions. I'm more than happy to get right back to them, and even just leave them in the comments section, and I'll check back and try to answer your questions.
Okay, that's a huge offer. He's offering up, his expertise in the area. So anybody, if you have any questions, I will make sure to do my best in the comments below. It sounds like Dan's going to check in on the comments as well. And I'll link Dan's YouTube channel, his Instagram, Facebook page, all that fun stuff. So if you have questions, his contact information will be there. I'll probably link your website if that's cool with you.
Whatever you can do to connect with us, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Appreciate you coming by.
All right. And that's going to wrap it up, folks. If you like what you see, please click the thumbs up button and subscribe. And as always, thanks for getting out west with Chris.